After spending $15,000 on my husband's dream business, I found him at our anniversary party whispering, "You're just a stepping stone," into his secretary's ear. When I asked him about it, he laughed and said, "Grow up, you were never wife material anyway." I left without a word, and 6 months later, he was crying in a motel parking lot begging me to answer my phone. I was standing in the middle of our anniversary party in a rented hall in downtown Kansas City, holding a champagne flute I suddenly couldn't feel in my hand. The lights were warm, everyone was laughing, and I was supposed to be celebrating 10 years of marriage. Instead, I was frozen in place, listening to my husband whisper into his secretary's ear like the two of them were alone in the room. "You're just a stepping stone," he murmured. At first, I honestly thought he meant her, like maybe he was turning her down, trying to set a boundary. But then he added, in this smug little half-whisper, half-laugh, "Don't worry, she'll be out of the picture soon enough." She giggled. That soft, embarrassed giggle people do when they know they shouldn't enjoy something but do anyway. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might faint. I didn't hear music anymore. I didn't hear clinking glasses or my mother chatting behind me. All I heard was him. All I saw was his hand resting on the small of her back, like it belonged there. I don't know how long I stood there before he turned, looked right at me, and didn't even flinch. He didn't pull his hand away. He didn't pretend he'd been caught doing something wrong. He just smirked like I'd interrupted him tying his shoe. When I walked over and asked, "What did you just say?" he didn't try to deny it. He laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a mean laugh, the kind of laugh someone uses when they want to make sure you know they don't respect you. "Grow up," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "You were never wife material anyway." It was like he swung a bat at my ribs. Everyone around us kept laughing and talking, completely unaware that my marriage was ending right there in front of the dessert table. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the drink. I didn't cause a scene. I just put the glass down on the nearest table and walked out of the hall without saying a single word. I didn't even bother grabbing my coat. I heard him call after me once, my name, sharp and annoyed, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the Kansas City night air was freezing, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I'd just sunk $15,000, money I had saved for my own future, into his stupid dream business. The same business he'd sworn would finally make him the man he'd always wanted to be. I'd believed him. I'd supported him. I'd watched him quit a stable job and jump headfirst into something he barely planned for because he told me we were a team. A team. I walked to my car in a blur, shaking, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard what I heard. But his voice kept replaying, over and over like a cruel echo. "You're just a stepping stone. You were never wife material anyway." I drove to my sister's place and showed up on her porch in an evening dress, mascara streaking down my cheeks. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me and let me sit on her couch until sunrise. That was 6 months ago. And now, 6 months after that moment where everything inside me cracked, I was pulling into the parking lot of a rundown motel on the edge of Independence, Missouri, watching my phone light up with his name for the 14th time in a row. He was somewhere in that parking lot, crying, begging me to answer, begging me to talk to him, begging me for something he swore I was never worthy of. But the real story, the part no one knows yet, started long before that night. And it's the part that explains why he ended up on his knees in a motel parking lot with no one else left to call. Before everything blew up, people thought we had a decent marriage. Not perfect, not dramatic, just normal. We lived in a small 2-bedroom bungalow in Rayton, the kind of place where neighbors wave from their driveways and everyone complains about property taxes like it's a competitive sport. From the outside, we looked steady, predictable, boring in that they'll probably hit 40 and start gardening way. But inside the house, the cracks had been forming for years. My husband, Mark, wasn't always cruel. That's the messed up part. If he had been awful from day one, I would have left sooner. Instead, he was one of those guys who could be incredibly charming one minute and cold the next, like he had two switches and I never knew which one he'd flip. When we first met, he was working as an operations coordinator at a logistics company, steady pay, steady hours. He used to talk about starting his own business one day, something in creative consulting, which sounded vague as hell, but he was passionate and convincing when he talked about it. He'd pull me close on the couch, kiss the top of my head, and say, "One day you'll look at me and say, 'Damn, I knew he was going to make it.'" I believed him. God, I believed him more than I believed myself. But over the years, the passion turned into frustration. He hated taking orders at work. He hated his boss. He hated the pay. He hated that other people our age were succeeding faster. He took every small setback as a personal insult. Meanwhile, I was working full-time at a dental office, paying bills, trying to keep everything running smoothly. Then came his secretary, Jenna, 26, fresh out of some communications program, always wearing pastel sweaters and acting like every idea he had was genius. She wasn't even his secretary at first. She worked in a different department, but somewhere along the way he started mentioning her more and more. Jenna said the presentation looked cleaner after I revised it. Jenna thinks the company is wasting my potential. Jenna's boyfriend is an idiot. She deserves better. Little comments that made my stomach tighten. When I mentioned it, he'd roll his eyes and say, "Please don't be that insecure wife." That line shut me up every time because insecurity was the last thing I wanted to be. Still, nothing set off alarm bells hard enough to make me think he'd betray me. Not until he quit his job to start his so-called business. I remember sitting at the kitchen table while he explained his vision, waving around a notebook filled with scribbles that looked more like procrastination than planning. He told me he needed an investment to get it off the ground. A big one, $15,000. I stared at him, feeling my heart climb into my throat. That money was supposed to be for my dental hygiene certification, my ticket to a higher salary. I'd been saving for it quietly, scraping what I could from each paycheck. When I said I wasn't sure, he leaned in and said, "Come on, don't you trust me? Don't you trust us?" He said it soft. He said it like a promise. And I folded, like I always did. Looking back, I should have known something was off from the way he celebrated afterward, not with gratitude, but with this weird triumphant energy, like he'd won something. The business never looked real to me. No clients, no marketing plan, no structure, but Mark acted like he was on the verge of greatness every day. And somewhere in that fog of ambition and ego, Jenna officially became his assistant. That was the beginning of the end, even if I didn't know it yet. Things didn't fall apart all at once. It was slow, like water dripping through drywall until one day the whole ceiling caves in. At first, Mark acted like the business was taking off. He walked around the house with this puffed-up energy, pacing while he talked on the phone, except the calls never lasted more than a minute. And they always ended with him saying something vague like, "Yeah, I'll circle back next week." But every time I asked how things were going, he'd snap, "Stop hovering. God, can you just let me work?" Or the one he used the most. Success doesn't bloom in front of spectators. He said it like it was some profound quote he'd written himself, but really it just meant he didn't want me asking questions. Meanwhile, our savings kept dropping. Rent, groceries. His business expenses. Gas for the car he insisted he needed for client meetings, even though he never brought home a contract, an invoice, or even a business card. And then there was Jenna. She started showing up in conversation the way a headache does, small at first, then constant, then impossible to ignore. If I came home early from work, Mark would be on speakerphone with her, sounding way too friendly. If I walked into the room mid-call, he'd immediately end it with some stiff, frustrated, "I'll get back to you." One afternoon, I came home and found 2 coffee cups on the kitchen counter. He claimed he'd gone out and brought one back for himself later, but one of the cups had lipstick on it, not my shade, not even close. He swore it was a printing defect. I wasn't stupid, I just wasn't ready. But the real escalation, the part that made something inside me start to wake up, came when my sister invited us to her birthday dinner at a small family restaurant in Lee's Summit. Mark claimed he had a late client call and would meet me there. He showed up 45 minutes late, with his shirt tucked in wrong and his hair messy like he'd been lying down. He smelled like cheap floral perfume. Not strong but noticeable. The kind of scent that sticks when someone's been standing too close for too long. When my sister hugged him hello, she leaned into me afterward and whispered, "You okay?" I lied and said yes. During dinner, he talked about his growth projections like he was running a Fortune 500 company instead of a laptop on our dining table. Every other sentence included, "Jenna and I have been brainstorming." My brother-in-law raised an eyebrow, but no one said anything. No one wanted to set off the landmine buried under Mark's ego. 2 nights later, he asked if I could spot him another $600 because a client project fell through. I told him I didn't have it. He didn't yell, he just stared at me with this cold, disgusted look, like I was failing him. That night, I lay awake in bed while he typed away angrily on his laptop in the living room. Around midnight, I walked out to get water. He didn't hear me at first. He was whispering into his phone, "Yeah, I know, she's slowing everything down, just be patient, I'm working on it." My chest tightened. I backed away before he saw me. The next morning, he was all smiles and breakfast in a to-go bag, as if the night before didn't exist. That's when I realized his niceness always came with purpose. He wasn't loving, he was maintaining access. And then the tension built until it snapped at the anniversary party. That public scene wasn't the beginning. It was just the first moment he stopped pretending. I used to think that was the worst part, but I was wrong, so wrong. Because after I walked out that night, I discovered the first twist, and it changed everything I thought I knew about him. 2 days after the anniversary party, I finally worked up the nerve to go back to the house in Rayton. Not to talk to him, God no, but to grab some clothes, my documents, and anything sentimental before he got home from whatever fake business meeting he was pretending to have. My sister waited in the car with the engine running. I walked inside with this numb determination, like I was performing a task instead of stepping through the ruins of my life. The house smelled different, stronger, sweeter, like someone had sprayed perfume and tried to air it out quickly. My stomach twisted, but I kept moving. I grabbed a duffel bag and headed to the bedroom. That's when I saw it, his laptop on the bed, screen still open, because he'd never locked anything in his life. He always assumed privacy was something he deserved but didn't owe anyone else. I shouldn't have looked, I know that. But hurt does something to you. Your mind wants truth, even if it cuts deeper. I sat down and moved the mouse. His email was open. At first, I thought it was just some boring business exchange. But then I saw the subject line in the thread he had highlighted. RE, transfer agreement, final steps. My heart kicked in my chest. Transfer? What transfer? I clicked. And my entire world twisted in one breath. It wasn't about his business. It was about me. He and Jenna had drafted, together, a separation plan. Something they literally titled the transition process. It read like some kind of corporate memo, except every bullet point was about phasing me out of his life. And the worst part? The email wasn't new. They'd been planning it for months. There were attachments, uploaded documents, and right there in a PDF was the most humiliating thing I have ever read in my entire life. Goal: secure financial investment from spouse before initiating the separation timeline. Invest, meaning my $15,000. They even outlined the milestones. It looked like a project plan. Build confidence in business concept. Request initial funding from spouse. Establish assistant role, J, as primary support figure. Begin staged emotional distancing. Finalize separation after business launch. Secure assets not bound by joint ownership. I covered my mouth so hard my knuckles went white. It wasn't an affair that broke me. It was realizing I had been a task, a line item, a resource to drain and replace. Then I saw another email, one he had sent her the morning of our anniversary party. After tonight, she should get the message. Be ready to move forward. She responded with a winky face. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll. Then I found the video. A screen recording he'd saved, probably to show her. It was a recording of him logging into our joint bank account. The account where my $15,000 had been. I watched the mouse move across the screen, watched the cursor click, transfer, watched the funds drop to almost nothing. He hadn't used it for the business. He had moved it into a private account under his name only. For weeks, he'd let me believe the business was struggling. He'd let me feel guilty for not giving him more money. And all that time, my savings, my future was sitting in his personal stash like some trophy. I shut the laptop so fast the screen rattled. I threw up in the bathroom. I washed my face. I packed my things. I walked out. I didn't cry until we were halfway back to my sister's place. And I didn't say a word about what I found. Not yet. Because that betrayal, the one he thought I'd never discover, became the fuel for everything that came next. It was the day I decided I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to make him. I didn't tell Mark I'd been back in the house. I didn't tell him I'd seen the emails, the transfer, the transition plan, or the disgusting way he and Jenna had turned my life into a timeline with deliverables. I didn't say a single word. Silence became my strategy. He texted me nonstop for a few days after the anniversary party, mostly angry bursts, demanding I come home because I was being dramatic, like he hadn't shattered my entire sense of reality in front of a room full of people. When I didn't respond, the messages shifted into passive-aggressive guilt trips. Can we be adults about this? You're embarrassing both of us. Come talk to me when you're done being emotional. I let them sit unread. He called. I declined. Blocked him? No, blocking would have tipped him off. I needed him comfortable, complacent. I wanted him believing I was broken and aimless and still orbiting his gravity like always. But while he assumed I was sulking, I was working. Planning, my sister called it quiet fury mode, and she wasn't wrong. Something inside me snapped into calculation. I'd been reactive for years, now I was controlled. Cold, focused. The first thing I did was order copies of every financial record with my name anywhere near it. Joint accounts, the car loan, our homeowner's insurance, the savings account he drained, everything. Then I set up a new personal checking account and had my employer reroute my paycheck there. Next, I visited a lawyer in Overland Park, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she'd been built out of blunt statements and caffeine. I sat in her office holding my documents like a shield. She listened to my story with a stone expression, taking notes in quick, deliberate strokes. When I told her about the $15,000 transfer, she leaned back and said, "Good. That's traceable. Good." That one word felt like oxygen. She explained exactly what I needed to do to prepare for a divorce he wouldn't see coming. She talked about asset discovery, marital fraud, and intentional deceptive dissipation of funds. Legal terms that sounded like justice sharpening its teeth. Then she said something I'll never forget. Don't confront him, don't warn him, let him think he's winning. So I did. I kept the same old routine so he wouldn't suspect anything. I went to work every day, I stayed at my sister. I even texted him once, just one line, "I need space." He ate it up. Narcissists love when they think you're retreating. Meanwhile, I gathered evidence, screenshots, bank statements. Copies of the emails, the PDF. I even printed the disgusting transition process plan. I triple-saved everything on a flash drive I kept hidden in an old cereal box in my sister's pantry. But the financial betrayal wasn't the only thing I was looking into. The lawyer and I dug deeper. And that's when she discovered something I never would have thought to check. His business wasn't just fake, it was registered under my name. He had submitted paperwork months earlier using my social security number, my address, my employment information, and even forged my signature on 2 documents. It was identity fraud. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to ruin me. I remember sitting in that lawyer's office, the air suddenly too thin to breathe. She put a hand on the desk and said calmly, "You can take him apart piece by piece, but you need to be patient." So I was. I watched him post inspirational quotes online about growth and loyalty, while he built a new life with the woman he used to call his assistant. I watched him play the victim to mutual friends. I watched him pretend everything was under control. And all the while, I was stacking dominoes behind the scenes, waiting for the exact right moment to flick the first one. But before I could make my move, something happened that changed my entire plan. Something I didn't see coming. Something that revealed just how deep his lies actually went. It hit harder than all the others combined. About a month into my quiet planning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. A woman's voice came through, shaky, hesitant. "Hi, is this Mark's wife?" I froze. "Who is this?" "My name's Danielle. I don't know how to say this, but I think your husband scammed me." My blood went cold. She explained that she'd met Mark through a small business mentorship group online. She paid him $3,500 for branding and strategy support, money she'd saved for almost a year. He promised her he'd help launch her dog grooming service in Overland Park. She said he sounded smart, confident, experienced, exactly what she was looking for, except he never delivered anything. Not a logo, not a plan. Not a single useful thing, and when she asked for a refund, he blocked her. I rubbed my forehead hard, pacing the room. "Why did you call me?" "Because," she swallowed. "Because I found your number in the paperwork he sent me. It listed you as the co-owner. I thought maybe you could help me get my money back." My stomach dropped. I didn't even have to ask. I knew exactly what paperwork she meant. The fraudulent business registration. He'd used my name on everything, and I thought that was the end of the damage. I thought the worst was that he'd tied me financially to his fake company. I was wrong. So wrong, because Danielle wasn't the only victim. She was just the first one brave enough to call me. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more people reached out, each with the same story. A photographer trying to start a studio. A mechanic wanting to expand his garage. A single mom hoping to start a catering business from home. All of them had paid Mark anywhere from $2,000 to $7,500. All of them had been ghosted. And in every single case, my name was on the paperwork, their contracts, their receipts, their business filings, all signed with my forged signature. He hadn't just drained my savings. He was building a scam empire and using me as the legal face of it. If those people had gone to the police first, I would have been the one questioned. If the IRS started poking around, my name would have been tied to income I had never seen. If one of his victims sued, I could have been dragged into court as the registered business owner. My lawyer's face when I told her, pure, contained rage. "We're past petty divorce strategy," she said. "This is criminal." "And he made you the fall guy." I sat there shaking, gripping the chair so hard my nails dug into the fabric. All those late-night calls he used to take, all those vague client meetings, all those times he told me I was holding him back. He wasn't building a business. He was building a fraud ring. And then, like a final punch, I found the last piece of the twist. One of the victims sent me a PDF Mark had emailed her. It was supposed to contain a business starter guide. Instead, when I opened it, I saw metadata at the bottom. Author Genesee, his secretary, his girlfriend, his little pastel-sweatered cheerleader. She wasn't just the side woman. She was his partner, his accomplice, his co-architect in the plan to bleed my life dry. Suddenly everything, the emails, the timeline, the cruel whispered comments at the anniversary party, felt like the surface layer over a much darker truth. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted me holding the blame. They wanted the collapse to land on my shoulders while they walked away clean. And the worst part, they thought I'd never figure it out. But I did. And once I knew what they were really capable of, once I understood the depth of their cruelty, the reason behind it, his reason, became the most chilling part of all. I thought I knew the worst of it. I thought the betrayal, the fraud, the scam victims, everything up to that point, was the full picture of who Mark had become. I was wrong. Because the real reason behind everything he did wasn't just selfishness or greed or lust. It was calculation. Cold, sharp, deliberate calculation rooted in something he'd been hiding for longer than I realized. I found out the truth because my lawyer, this relentless, steel-spine woman, dug deeper into his financial activity. She subpoenaed transactions tied to the fake business. She requested copies of his credit applications. She combed through every digital breadcrumb. One afternoon, she called me into her office and shut the door behind us. She didn't even sit down. "There's something you need to see," she said. She slid a stack of printed documents across the desk. The top page was a credit denial letter from a bank in Kansas City, dated almost a year earlier. The rejection reason, unacceptable credit history and high-risk profile. My eyebrows pulled together. This doesn't make sense. His credit was good 2 years ago. She tapped the next page. This is why. It was a report showing unpaid debts, defaulted personal loans, several maxed-out credit cards, and something even worse, 2 accounts that had been flagged for suspected fraudulent activity. I stared at the numbers, the dates. The warnings stamped in bold red letters. These aren't mine, I said. No, she replied. They're all his. But I would have seen this, I would have known. She shook her head. Not if he kept everything under accounts you didn't have access to. Not if he opened lines of credit behind your back, and definitely not if he used you as a buffer. A buffer, I repeated, her expression hardened. Yes, he needed someone with clean financials, someone stable. Someone he could attach himself to so he could keep operating. And then she told me the truth. Mark had been lying about his financial status for years. His dream business wasn't a dream, it was a necessity, a cover. A way to generate fast cash because he was drowning in debt collectors, credit flags, and investigations. He didn't choose Jenna because he loved her. He didn't leave me because he fell out of love. He didn't push me away because he wanted independence. He targeted me because I was useful, because I had savings, because I had clean credit. Because I had a steady job and a predictable life. Because I was the perfect mask for him to wear while he built a fraudulent house of cards. And then my lawyer showed me the final piece, a downloaded email. A message he'd sent to someone I didn't know 3 months before the anniversary party. The subject line was blunt. She's too compliant, it's easy. In the body of the email, he wrote, she thinks I'm stressed because of work. She'll sign anything if I tell her it's temporary. I'm using her name until I can secure my own accounts again. Once I'm stable, I'm done. No point in keeping someone around who can't elevate me. No emotion, no hesitation. No shame, just pure, purposeful exploitation. He didn't see me as a partner. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a tool, a stepping stone, just like he whispered into Jenna's ear at our anniversary party. A resource to squeeze dry. The realization hit me harder than any betrayal. He never planned a future with me. He planned an exit strategy through me. Everything, every word, every touch, every apology had been part of a long-term setup. It wasn't heartbreak I felt. It was dread. Because I finally understood the truth. He wasn't just selfish. He was dangerous. And he was about to learn what happens when the person you underestimate the most becomes the person holding every piece of evidence that can destroy your entire world. The night everything came together was 6 months after the anniversary party. The same night he ended up crying in that motel parking lot, clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. But the real revenge didn't start there. It started 3 weeks earlier. My lawyer and I finalized a coordinated plan that hit every angle of his scheme at once: civil, criminal, financial. Nothing sloppy, nothing emotional, everything airtight. The first step was protecting the victims he scammed using my name. With their permission, my lawyer filed a joint fraud complaint, naming him as the perpetrator and clarifying that I had been used as an unknowing identity shield. The second step was filing for divorce, quietly, strategically, served to him at his new apartment while he was walking out with Jenna, coffee in hand. According to the process server, Jenna dropped hers on the ground and stepped in it. But the third step, the one that gutted him, was the forensic audit my lawyer submitted to the state. It documented every fraudulent credit application, every forged signature, every bank transfer he hid, every business coaching payment he stole. And the fourth step, I froze the joint account he thought I wasn't watching, then filed a motion restricting him from opening any new lines of credit under my name, effective immediately. The mask fell off fast after that. He went from arrogant to frantic in days. The first meltdown happened when he realized the victims had gone to the authorities. The second when he realized I wasn't going to bail him out. The third when he learned the fake business, registered in my name, was now legally classified as an instrument of fraud. And then came the phone calls. Over and over. All hours. Long voicemails of him cycling between rage and desperation. You don't understand how bad this looks. They're blowing it out of proportion. Jenna had nothing to do with this, don't drag her down too. We can fix this if you just talk to me. This is your fault for not supporting me. This is your fault. Please. Please, I need you. I didn't answer a single one. When investigators reached out, I cooperated fully. I gave them the emails, the registration documents, the bank transfers, the recorded PDF, the metadata files, every single detail. And slowly, methodically, his world started collapsing in on itself. 3 clients sued him. 2 credit card companies flagged him. The state opened an inquiry. A detective called him in for questioning. His personal bank account was frozen for review. And Jenna, she bylayed. She turned on him fast, telling investigators she just helped with admin stuff and had no idea what he was doing. Which brings us to the motel parking lot. He called me that night, sobbing so hard the words broke apart. "They're going to arrest me," he choked out. "Please, you have to help me. You always help me." I didn't respond. I drove to the motel only because the detective told me they needed confirmation he wasn't in danger of hurting himself. I parked across the lot, far away, where he couldn't see me. I watched him pace under a flickering light, crying into his hands, phone pressed to his ear. My phone rang again, his name lighting up the screen, again, and again, and again. I didn't answer. He had told me once that I wasn't wife material. He was right. I was something much more dangerous, a woman who finally stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. A woman he taught, through cruelty, betrayal, deception, and fraud, exactly how to live without him. I stayed long enough to confirm he was physically safe. Then I put my car in drive, pulled away from the lot, and blocked his number for the last time. He disappeared from my life after that, swallowed by his own mess, left alone to face every consequence he built with his own hands. And me, I got my closure, the kind that doesn't need forgiveness. The kind that comes from watching a man finally drown in the lies he tried to bury you under. Turns out I wasn't a stepping stone after all. I was the ground he never learned was solid until it vanished beneath him.